Okay, welcome everybody, and welcome everybody to the IES committee meeting tonight on the 14th of June 2022, and I'd like to welcome all those that are viewing this meeting on YouTube. We'll start with the statement of acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands of the Gun people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Thank you. Now, a roll call. We've got not everybody here, everybody here that is here. We've got some apologies from Mayor Redman and Councillor Shanks, and we've got Councillor Little on leave. Is that an issue? An issue over there? Okay. Yep. No worries. All good? Yeah, right. Okay, we'll continue on. Yep. Apologies from Councillor Shanks and Mayor Redman. Any motions to grant leave of absence? None. And we have one leave of absence, Councillor Little. And we've got no non-attendance. All good? Just want to wait there. Okay, okay. Okay, yep, okay. Public open forum, is there any? It doesn't look like there's anyone in the gallery that wants to speak tonight. Any declarations of interest? Yep.
7.4, I have a perceived conflict. I have a relative that actually lives in Charles Street, not Edward Street, which is being discussed, and I'll be staying in the room.
Okay, thank you. And you've done your paperwork, Di? Yep, thank you. Confirmation of minutes for the meeting of the 3rd of May 2022. Anybody like to, any takers there? Councillor Hughes, like to move it, and Councillor Fraser, you'd like to second it? Any discussion? Councillor Hughes? Okay, Councillor Fraser? No, okay, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, business arising from the minutes and previous minutes. We've got a whole selection there. You would have noticed there's some there that there's no status update. I checked with Sam and Jack, and there was a bit of a glitch in the system. So any of those there that say no, that haven't got any status update, Jack's got answers for them. So any questions for the staff for those issues? Nothing. Any at all? Oh, just give a chance, people. Yep, Councillor Hughes.
Just checking, I think there was an apology on the 3rd of May and I've moved the minutes for the 3rd of May. So whether that needs to be amended or...
I don't get what. Sorry, what's the?
Because I wasn't present, but
okay.
I have seen them and read the minutes. And I'm happy, but just a question, I suppose.
That's okay.
Then I don't think I was present on the 3rd of May. I'm trying to remember whether I was or wasn't. But
so you're saying you don't want to move the minutes?
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering whether that is still legal. Whether,
yeah, because we already voted on that. So
yeah.
It's okay. Yeah,
it's okay.
Yeah,
no
yeah, that's fine.
Thanks.
Okay. Now, any issues that from the previous meetings? I've got a couple. The first one is to do with the landscape irrigation and maintenance plan update. In there, we talk about putting soil moisture monitoring systems, I assume, at certain parks. Will that be extended to all the irrigated spaces?
Through
yeah.
Chair, At this point, there was funding allocated as part of that program that have been and targeted at our major reserves. We have built that into our new specifications for new reserves that are coming on board, that they're being implemented. We don't have any budget to go back retrospectively, but it's something that we'll look to do operationally out of existing budgets where we have the capacity to do so.
Okay.
So that's the current methodology.
Okay, yep. My next question was whether that was going to be implemented with the new developments.
Yeah.
And are you finding savings by using these monitors?
The proof will be in reviewing this year's data. So staff are actually looking in the process of compiling that and the IPOS reporting at the moment.
Yep.
And then we'll, but I think there's been a significant improved intelligence in the business, particularly in regards to that soil depth and moisture, and actually has resulted in significant reduction of irrigation cycles. I haven't seen the actual data at this point, but I'm suggesting that it would actually be a good year from an IPOS reporting perspective.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, my next one is to do with the traffic devices on Sunnydale Avenue. Just to update with that. Oh, sorry, Di, do you want to say that one? No, you do it.
I was going to ask about that because part of it was that they were going to put signage up about trucks using Sunnydale. And I understand that the rest of it's to do when the cycle pass finished, I think. But what about the signage for the trucks? Can that go up or has it gone up?
So through you, Chair, all of that work has been now wrapped up and be delivered as part of the Cycleway project. So it's with that contract to deliver. So that project scheduled for completion by September this year. I just don't know exactly the timing when it will be completed, but we're at that point that it's been built into that contract.
Excellent. Cody.
Just around the Barossa tourist train proposal, has there been anything? I guess the last update on here was sort of pre the new Labor state government. I was just wondering if anything's changed in that regard.
Through the chair, no further update to provide.
Yep. Okay, my next one is to do with the hard waste. Where is it? Yeah, the hard waste, and there's no status update. When we will be considering that again, because there was some issue around the cost and where the material is taken to.
Through the chair, the program has continued and has continued from May to June. So we will be recommencing again in July with that service. So the waste will still be continued to be going to Norma. The only further discussions are whether we accept the second point of disposal, which is here in Gawler.
Yes,
Way. So that's currently sort of in discussion.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Norma.
Yep, excellent. Any other questions? Okay, no other questions, we'll move on then. Okay, decision report 7.1, Northern Adelaide Waste Management Authority, Food Organics and Garden Organics presentation. And we've got Mr. John Phillips, and he's the acting CEO of Norma, and Mr. Daniel Dunn, who's the operations manager. And John's going to give us a presentation. Daniel's here to answer any other questions. So, John, do you want to give us the presentation? Do you want questions as we go or at the end? Yep, no problems.
So the presentation has been pre-prepared. Just to give you a bit of background on Norma for those people that need possibly a bit of an update. We are a subsidiary with Salisbury, Playford and Town of Gawler as our constituent councils. We own and operate a landfill at Yulbury. We have a renewable waste electricity plant and solar farm on that site. We operate 2 resource recovery centres. We operate a free household chemical and paint drop-off facility, one of only 4 operating in South Australia. And we own a material recovery facility which is probably without a doubt the leading MRF in South Australia and very well respected. We service approximately 110,000 houses across the 3 constituent councils. We generate about 10,000 megawatt of electricity to power about 1,900 homes from our landfill gas and solar plant. We recover about 32,000 tonne of organic materials, which are sent to a composting facility in South Australia from a commercial perspective. We process about 56,000 tonne roughly of putrescible waste that is baled and goes to the Yulbury landfill. We provide employment for around about 100 persons across our 3 constituent councils. At our MRF, we facilitate the sorting of around about 60,000 tonne of recyclables, and that includes some recyclables from councils outside our constituent councils. We actually facilitate probably about 26 councils, which is a legacy of the China sword, I think some years ago, where there were issues with bans of export. And we provide, I heard hard waste collection a minute ago, we provide about 37,000 hard waste collection services across the 3 constituent councils. Are you able to please just move the next. There we go. So that's just a bit of a chart, a matrix of our 3 constituent council, a breakdown in roughly what we offer: curbside collection, hard waste collection, mainstream waste bin collection, recycling bin collection. FOGO is what I'm here to talk to you and included in this presentation tonight, food and organics. We have a customer service and call centre that takes in the vicinity of 250 plus calls a day and has been over 300 calls a day during the peak of COVID. We've got the MRF processing, we've got the landfill disposal, we run a bin repair and maintenance and replacement service, and we have a community resource recovery centre at both Bellchambers Road and Research Road. The Research Road centre is about to undertake an upgrade, and of course we manage the bin administration. So our commitment really for step change is to partner with our constituent councils and manage the recycled content produced by our communities and ultimately look for some procurement so that we've got a true circular economy. Increase curbside diversion to 70%, which is the government target or green industries target. A very ambitious target in my view, and I'm sure there'll be lots and lots of discussion in the foreseeable future about how we can reduce contamination and increase diversion, how we can incentivise access to the 3 bin system to all residents. And it's interesting to note with circular economy and COVID how some new commercial or potential commercial activities are arising in the communities to attract residual waste and problematic wastes, which might sit outside of, say, the Norma collection service. And that's something we're looking at the moment. There's some pros and there's some cons, but certainly it's about servicing the communities. And we're also, with our Yulbury landfill site forecast to close in around about 26, 27, we are looking at alternate waste disposal options leading to that closure. So our budget overview for Norma, we've grown exponentially in the last 2 or 3 years. This year we're not far off $50 million, so it's a reasonable size operation. We've got a balanced operating result for 22-23 in our draft budget. We've got some austerity measures in waste diversion, cost-saving activities to try and reduce costs on your behalf to ensure that constituent councils get good value. You're currently paying 0 tonnes recycling processing fee versus a market rate of around about $130 a tonne.
John, just quickly, did you want these slides to flick through or not?
They can just go through.
Are you speaking to each slide or not?
Yes, I'm just speaking to each slide.
Do you want to tell Connie when to go to the next slide?
The next one. Yep.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
I has. Sorry.
Thanks, Henry.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
And of course, our budget is based on a number of assumptions that relative to high demand in the hard waste service from residents, both through collections and vouchers, full cost recovery of the solid waste levy, which is the major proportion of the cost, partial cost recovery of administrative charges. Next, please. Just a little bit of a dashboard. We've got a fairly significant capital investment program with some funding through the modernisation grant program for a fibre polishing plant. We're currently going through the prudential review process for that. There have been some delays and some potential overruns due to COVID and cost increases and availability of infrastructure. We did have this year a significant and sustained increase in hard waste service collections, and I'm aware that Town of Gawler had some challenges there, and that's, I think, as a direct result of COVID and people working from home, having more time in their own yard and putting stuff out, and we were overwhelmed on a number of occasions during the course of the year. We have been able to supply through contracts to the collection of our glass fines, which are being used in road and footpath base, and there's an opportunity for council in a procurement context. We've had increased uptake of food and organics, and I'll touch on that in a minute for Town of Gawler. Of course, we've had a significant increase in annual CPI inflation, and we've been able to offset to some extent with our market exports, paper and fibre and some plastics, and the prices have been relatively high, but no guarantee that that's going to be sustained. We're upgrading the Paraka Resource Recovery Centre. We have got some issues that we're facing in terms of export bans and quality specifications of some of our product that we export overseas. We probably process about 50% of all of South Australia's yellow bins. And we do have lots and lots of issues relative to COVID with a change in waste stream, the mix of waste, and how we have to manage that. Next, please. Next. Thanks. So we've put together a budget forecast for 22-23 for the Town of Gawler. If you look at the right-hand side, the bar charts, you can see the breakdown in terms of allocation increases that total around about an overall cost increase of 5.57 in the real costs. Hard waste, solid waste levy at this stage is an estimate of how that will increase. We're saying probably 3 or 4% to $153. EPA hasn't released that information as of yet. It's always a bit of a guessing game. Curbside collections, waste processing, administration fees, and bin charges. Next. So in terms of food and organic service change, Town of Gawler's got approximately 11,825 households. We're looking over a 3-year period to implement FOGO across 69-70% participation. With upfront costs, this is over a 3-year period. We're hoping, subject to our take up of FOGO, we're hoping that we may be able to secure a discount on bins, which are roughly around about $80 per bin. We might be able to get those down in the vicinity of 60, subject to maybe an 80% take up. as I said, it would be majority of bin costs incurred over 3 years. It's an opt-in versus council-wide rollout, and no doubt councillors giving lots of consideration to that. There are options to consider size of bin, 240 or 140, and if it's a smaller bin, there may be some cost savings there. And I believe that Daniel has a select tender process underway or about to get underway with the new bins that will be underpinning that program. Next, please. The next one is just again a bar chart on comparisons of 22 fees and 1st of July 23 fees. Temporary processing fee has been reduced from $5 to $0. Glass fines have increased slightly by $2.60. Waste processing has increased slightly. Solid waste levy, as I said, it's 150 in here. We suspect it might be 153, 154. Curbside bins the same. Street sweeping's the same. Hard waste voucher, a slight increase there. And that's reflected, of course, in our contractual arrangements with our transporter, and no doubt fuel costs and energy costs, labour costs, etc. have all gone up. A 50-cent increase on the voucher, and a small increase on mattresses, which are one of those problematic wastes that we need to manage. Next, please. So we're proposing a 1.1 increase for Town of Gawler, the 22-23 draft budget. There's some non-controllable costs, solid waste levy, CPI increase. We've based that on approximately 2%. Most people around this table will say, well, hang on, it's much more than that at the moment. We are aware of that, but we believe we've got a little bit of fat in the budget, and we're quite prepared to revisit that increase if we have to with the R1, which would be in September. Longer term strategic outlook. We've got a pretty strong business case in terms of the region, making sure that we can continue to, where possible, generate jobs, improve environmental outcomes. You know, we're paying about $11 million in waste levy funding, and one of our targets is always EPA to understand where that money goes and how it might be better hypothecated back to our councils, and that's an ongoing discussion. And we have the CapEx investment in the recycled fibre polishing plant, which will probably be around about the $16 million by the time we get to commence and build. And of course, we have a future before us where the landfill will close, and we're looking at options in terms of what those alternatives might be. So that's a fairly quick run through of key points with Norma and where we're at. We've got a busy year ahead. We'll continue to grow. I think we've got some through our team, a really good team in terms of education, community engagement. Certainly strong focus on FOGO, which aligns with the state government and need to maximise food and organics recovery. And ultimately, there'll be some challenges, we think, with the change waste streams and COVID impacts that will continue to impact on our business for at least the next 12 months. Happy to answer any questions as long as they're not too hard.
David, you got a question? Yep. You pressed your button. There we go. Yep.
Thanks, Paul. Just you mentioned that the mattresses are problematic, and it's one of the things that is sort of dumped around the area. And it's probably something I've noticed more and more. Whether you've got any comments on recycling or in the future of ways of dealing, even using the industry itself, I don't know, but yeah, interested in your comments on it.
There's been a new operation opened on Grand Junction Road, which takes mattresses. The big thing with mattresses is cost. that when it comes to illegal dumping, it's about people not prepared to pay to go to a resource recovery centre or a drop-off centre. And, you know, I think every local council's got the same problem in terms of the midnight dumper and mattresses and furniture that's left on the curbside. One example, it all gets down to cost and probably, you know, laziness when it comes to people maybe contacting council for a voucher or whatever. But this new, I haven't seen it yet. They have had 3 or 4 invites for people to go and have a look at this new processing plant, but COVID has stepped in the way each time they want people on site. So there is some activity out there, but mattresses are one of the problematic wastes in terms of handling and cost to dispose.
Any other questions? Actually, I've got a couple of questions. John, do you want to just describe what a polishing plant is and why it's important? Oh, Daniel? Yeah, it's a question. Yeah.
Through the chair. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, fibre polishing plant. 50% of what's in the yellow recycling bin is paper and cardboard, and that paper and cardboard, for us to on-sell that product after we've sorted it, it must meet a specification. And the specification current day allows for about 4 to 6% of contamination that's allowed to be in that paper and cardboard. With new regulations coming in, that 4 to 6% contamination that's in the paper and cardboard must be brought back to 2% or less. Okay, so they've tightened up the regulation specification that sits around paper and cardboard being recycled, which we welcome. We don't have a problem with that, but for Norma, for us to get it down to 2%, it becomes challenging for our staff that are hand-picking the product to clean up the paper and cardboard. So what we have to do is actually invest in optical sort technology to help us refine that paper and cardboard and get it down to 2%. And what's known in the industry, the plant is called a paper polishing plant. So what we're doing is refining paper and cardboard, getting it down to 2% so that we can meet a specification to continue to trade that product.
So Daniel, where will that material be traded?
Yeah, that will be traded both onshore and offshore. The beauty of once we get to that specification, Paul, is being able to trade both onshore and offshore commercially makes very good sense for our constituent councils. It really does raise the value of the product that we recover, and it makes it more sustainable, because the fact is that the capacity in Australia to take all of the paper and cardboard that Australia produces is not large enough. So there's too much paper and cardboard for Australia to handle. So the reality is we do need to export some material. We'd love to be able to process it all here, but we don't have the infrastructure in place to recycle it all here. So we need to be able to send some offshore. The paper polishing plant will give us that ability to continue to do that in years to come.
Yes, so the 16 million capital expense will now open up that market for Norma.
It will. It'll open up that market for Norma, and it'll give us some return on investment as well.
Diane, you had a question? Oh, Dan, you need to turn yours off.
Sorry.
That's all right. And
okay. So what causes contamination on the paper and the cardboard? Is it the is it the sticky tape that goes around it, or what is it?
Yeah, very good question. The contamination varies. A lot of the time, we refer to it as contamination. It's just material that's not paper and cardboard. So it can be plastics, it can be aluminium, steel products. It can be, some of your stickies. With the 2% tolerance, normally sticky tape that's around a bit of paper and cardboard, that's not the one that really hurts us. It's when you go back to the source, when we collect it at the curbside, what makes it really helpful for our residents is that they can put it in a bin and it's all commingled. Our job, once we get that bin and we tip it into a truck and then we receive it at the MRF, is separating all that material into light categories, which we do an awesome job. But unfortunately, to get it down to that minute specification, it becomes very challenging in a fast-paced environment. So putting in state-of-the-art equipment to help us do that, it will just enable us to separate that bottle, that aluminium can, or that bit of film plastic away from the paper and cardboard, so that we meet that criteria. I hope that answers the question, Diane.
Yeah. Any other questions for Daniel and Henry?
Daniel, we've got provided for in our budget for next year $80,000 for the FOGO initiative. What will we likely save as a consequence of rolling out the FOGO program and then directing green waste away from landfill in terms of the solid waste levy and other associated benefits, such that, you know, yes, we're spending 80,000, but we're saving X amount of dollars? Would you know what that figure would be off the top of your head, roughly?
At the moment, we're looking at a levy that's going to be 150, 153. So for every tonne of greens that goes into a red bin, that's what the cost is going to be, plus some handling on the way through. So it's plus 150. If we can get that tonne of material out of the red bin and put it into the green bin, we're not paying the 150. We're paying more like a $30 to $35 number. Does that make sense? So it's net around $120, $130 that we save for every tonne we divert away from the red bin into the green bin.
Yep. Yep, that's.
The problem I think we have with the green bins is people like me at the moment. I went from a big garden down to practically no garden. So therefore my green bin doesn't need to be emptied very often. But if you put your food organics in it, which I do, it gets really smelly, and especially in the summer. And so therefore I think a lot of people go back to using their red bin instead of putting it in their green bin. And I think that's a problem. I don't know how we can sort that out though.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Diane. We are heavily at the moment talking to our residents about those same issues. There's a couple of things that come to mind in relation to answering that. We are looking at, let's call it a bin menu. So instead of having your standard 240 litre bin for your FOGO, for your greens, particularly when you're using food waste and in smaller households, we're actually only the last fortnight we've sourcing 140 litre squat bins. So we're reducing the size of the bin so that we can cater for smaller households, smaller yards, etc. As a bit of a trial at the moment, but we do believe that it will take off. In regards to turning food organics from a fortnightly collection into a weekly collection and vice versa with the red bin, I'm thinking John's probably better to talk to that one from an industry-wide perspective rather than just a Norma perspective. Did you want to have a trial? There is some trial. I know Charles Sturt are doing some and Holdfast, yeah. So Charles Sturt Council, Holdfast Bay are doing some trials at the moment. We're watching very closely and taking the learnings away from those guys and bringing them to the Norma board to look at you know, talking to our residents and hopefully somewhere in the near future we can look at rolling some of that out.
Just on that, Daniel, I thought there was legislation that required the red bin to be picked up each week in urban, not rural, but in the urban environment. So is that going to change? Or? Yep.
Yeah, look, at the moment, Paul, I don't know the answer to
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I believe you are correct. I think it's been tried before where they've tried to get it up and it's fallen over. I don't think it's going to be one of those things that's for everyone. But that's where it's key for us to be talking to our residents and getting feedback. And then, you know, we go step by step with that one.
Yeah, so
And
essentially
see
swapping the red and the green bin around.
Perhaps, yeah, perhaps is that where we end up? Is it just a smaller bin? Is it a bin that's vented? You know, there's some councils that have vents in their bins, so that when the summertime does come around, that they're vented a little bit better and they're not don't have as much odour. So they're the types of things we need to be talking to our residents about.
Send them to Darwin or something and see how that works up there. Anyway, any other questions for Daniel and John? It's been pretty. Any other questions? No, well, thank you, Daniel and John. We'll continue on with, we've got a motion here and whatever, so continue on with that. That's excellent.
Counter people relative to the trial that they ran there, because the legislation is correct that you've got to have a residual bin pick up every week. They got around it by offering a trial via an opt-in system. So they did a trial in a certain street, those that opted in and those that didn't opt in. So that was their comparative data.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, we've got an officer's recommendation. Actually, I've got a question. I might ask the question first. It's to Paul. I think in the budget we've got $80,000 for this year, but listening to John, that could be over 3 years. Is that right? That the $80,000 to buy the bins could be over 3 years. So how do we do that?
Through the chair, my understanding from previous conversations was there was an upfront cost of 80,000 predominantly for the purchase of the bins.
Okay. Is that right? It's just that I heard that we could buy them over 3 years. That was the thing. The 80,000 spread over 3 years. Is that right or not? Yes. It could. The 80,000 could be mitigated over several years. The 80,000. So if we've got 80,000 in the budget, is it really only $20,000 odd this year? 20 and another 20 to make the 80.
Through the chair, look, I'd have to take that on notice. But at this stage, as you might be aware, we have the 80 grand fully provided in 22-23. But you know, we can review that in advance of the adoption of the budget.
Yep, fantastic. Okay, that was mine. Any other questions before we ask for a mover and a second? David, you want to move it? You want to speak to this? And Brian,
Yeah, happy to move the motion. Yeah, they talking to the Norma people before the meeting, they did say we could don't be over 3 years. And I think that's what Playford Council's looking at, because they've got $1 million bill. So they did actually say that they could do a similar deal for Gawler. So it's not just a big upfront.
Yes, it's not the 80,000, but spread over 3 years.
But yeah, happy to move the motion, and yeah, thanks for the members for coming out tonight.
I think Brian, you wanted to second it. Do you want to speak, Brian?
I suppose it's only about what you mentioned there before, because it's got their normal suggested total cost. Council suggested ways to mitigate and spread this cost over several years. Well, what are we talking? 2 years, 5 years, 25 years? Three. Just three.
3 years.
Well, it hadn't got three there. Yeah,
No.
but I'm happy to second.
Okay. Okay. Any other? Di, did you want to speak or not? Or?
Seconder, but the big problem with the red bin being collected fortnightly is nappies, of course. That's probably the major contamination that goes in the red bin. So that's the problem.
Yep. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. David, do you want to? Okay. Okay. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. 7.2. Pedestrian safety, Redbanks Road, Haynes Road, Dawkins Avenue, Wayland Road roundabout. Actually, I might just take questions before we get. I actually quite like the questions answered before someone moves it. Any questions on this item? Brian, you've got some questions?
The question is, as you know, I bring it up time and time again, are these roads Gawler's roads or dip ties road? That's the most important thing, because is this roundabout a dip tie roundabout? It's like all the other discussions we have about roadways here, is what does this council own if we're going to invest this money? And one of the major problems of this whole thing is over a school, which is not even in our council, it's in the Light District Council. So I'd just like to know who owns what, please?
Mr. Deline, do you want to talk to that and maybe just talk a bit around the funding as well?
Thank you for the chair. The actual roadways are a combination of council and state government owned roads. So Wayland Road and Redbanks Road are state government controlled roadways, whereas Haynes Road, Dawkins Road are council roadways. The roundabout itself is owned by the Department of Transport. However, the infrastructure on the footpaths, for instance, and curbs reside with the residual council that those state government roads go through. So they're council assets. So it's our responsibility to provide those facilities. Where it gets a little bit grey is the crossing places, and generally the installation has been a combination of both state government funded and delivered and council funded and delivered, depending on the priority and where the genesis of the inquiry comes from. In this instance, we have a state government MP that's committed 100% of the cost of constructing the pedestrian improvements, as well as the state government in the Department of Infrastructure and Transport seeking to fund the pedestrian crossing further up across Redbanks Road by Morgan Court. So there really is a zero cost to council other than our project management costs to facilitate the outcome.
Right, thank you. Is there any other questions? Diane, you got a question? Okay. Any other questions before I ask for a mover and a seconder? Okay. Okay. Ask for a mover of this motion. Jim, you happy to? And you want to speak to this, Jim? Okay. Kelvin, second it. You want to speak to it? Oh, okay. Anybody want to speak? David. Yeah. I'll get. Yeah.
The crossing.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Go.
Oh, sorry. Was it somebody else?
You go. No, that's fine.
The crossing up there by Morgan Court. Years ago, several years ago now, I used to drop a young lad off to that school in the mornings, and I used to drive into Morgan Court and then come out of Morgan Court, and most of the traffic there is turning right back into Gawler, and I agree with in the report where the school said that maybe it was better to look at the crossing the other side of Morgan Court, because I don't know that there's too many cars that go into Morgan Court that come out and turn left. I just think that's something to look at. But as I said, it was several years ago that I did it, so things may have changed a bit.
Okay. David, you want to?
Just that I think this is a good outcome because for a while there it looked like council would be paying for footpaths around here and some of the safety upgrades. So it's actually it's good news. So yeah, very, very supportive, and it is really a safety hazard for children because they don't always follow the road rules and run across. So it's quite a dangerous area at times. And yeah, especially when you've got now grade 7s, the younger students there as well. So yeah, so certainly happy to support the motion.
Yep. Anybody else want to speak on this motion? No. Jim, do you want to close the debate? You're right. Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Which is what's next? Clonley Reserve Dog Park update. Now I'll just ask for any, I'll take it as read. I'll ask for any questions of staff before I ask for a move in a second. Any questions, any comments? Brian, you want to press your button?
Thank you, Chairman Paul. Regarding the dog park, yes, it's certainly a tremendous success and all that sort of thing. But I believe that it's a free park. And, you know, like in other areas, that's not the case all over South Australia. And I just wonder, you know, like if we're going to spend another 48 or 50 odd $1,000 and that sort of stuff, because it's a rennie. We've never had a report on who uses that dog park. I mean, do they all come from other council areas or are they only from county? I mean, we've never received any real report on who uses it. Sorry?
Yeah. Okay. I think actually I asked this question. Maybe one of the staff could comment.
I think the question was about the use of dog park by other council areas. One thing that we didn't put in the report, maybe on reflection could have been added, was that we had an existing arrangement with Light Regional Council that they contribute a percentage to the operating costs of the dog park, and there'd been about $6,500. And that was historically based upon the number of dog registrations in Hewitt. We've recently, as of late last week, caught up with them because that agreement was coming to an end at 30th of June. At this point, in principle, at officer level, we've agreed to a 10-year extension to that agreement. And as it currently stands, there's 773 dogs registered in Hewitt. So that gives you some idea of the likely sort of extent that will come down. I think through the consultation, if it's endorsed, we'll get a better understanding of the where those users actually come from, that actually, the people that use the dog park. But effectively at this point, we believe it's about 20% based on the data we have of users come from the Hewitt area that use dog park.
Okay. Yep. Correct, Jim. Yep.
This is to Henry.
Yep.
There was an incident or something about a dog. I was reading on an email. Is that right? A dog bite or something, or?
Yeah, through the chair, leading up to tonight's meeting, a resident asked some questions about the number and nature of dog attacks that we've had. I might get Jack to respond to that through the chair if you're happy for that to happen.
Through the chair, the question related to how many incidents we had in the dog park since its inception back in 2018, and we've had 4 dog-on-dog incidents. One dog-on-dog incident that resulted in a bite on a person actually trying to separate the 2 dogs from fighting. And then we had 2 CRMs related to an allegation, but there were no reports provided as to who it was. So in total, over since 2018, we've had 7 incidences in the dog park, which is pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah. If I could just comment that we take our dog up there a fair bit, and people know if a dog is not quite right, and people leave if the dog isn't aggressive, or they will talk to people about their dog and they will leave. So there is a lot of self-management up there in the dog park. It's really good. Anyway, any other questions? I'll ask. So this is noting the report, updating and stakeholder engagement. Now, someone to move this motion? Jim, excellent. Someone second, David. Jim, do you want to speak to it? David, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, just briefly. Yeah, no, the dog park is really well loved. It's probably too well loved. That's why we need to do this work. There's always there's always lots of dogs whenever I go past, and it's well used. It makes sense to try and use that extra area that's being fenced off the bottom. Yeah, I don't know how much extra consultation we really need, because I think most people just want it opened up and used. So yeah, I just think a simple process there is. But yeah, I do remember when the dog park was open that the Mayor, Bill O'Brien, did promise that Light Council would put money into the building of it, which I don't know how much we did get, but they were very keen, because they actually tried to get a dog park up in Hewitt and the residents didn't want it, so it didn't go ahead. Yeah, it's probably less than 100 metres or so from the boundary. A few, sounds very close. But yeah, happy to support the motion.
Yeah, I'll speak to the motion as well. I mean, as I said, we visited a fair bit. People like the extra area for the bigger dogs to run because the dogs have more space, and it will take pressure off the irrigated grass. I mean, I'm quite keen for for example, the mulch to be removed because I think it does impact on the area that dogs can use, and dogs do eat it. If they eat it, they're off to the vet. That costs you a lot of money. So there's a whole range of things. And swapping the two dogs around, I think, would be a good idea because the little dogs don't do much less damage to the turf because they just waddle around. They run around their little legs. They're not sort of screaming around and cutting up the turf. So anyway, that's just my point of view. But I'll probably put in my my view anyway. Okay, we've got anybody else got anything to say? Okay, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? It's carried. Uh, 7.4 Edward Street footpath works. Now I'll just ask for any questions anyone's got. Okay, yep.
I have a perceived conflict on this as I have a relative that lives in Charles Street, but I will be staying in the room.
Okay, no worries. Any questions or issues people want to raise on this at all? No. So would someone like to move it as is? Jim, you want to speak to it? No. Someone like to second it? Brian? No. So who would like to second it? Oh, sorry, I thought you. No, Jim's moved it, so you're seconding it, Brian. Do you want to speak to it, Brian? Yep. Okay. Anybody else want to speak to this? Yep. Okay.
I will vote for this, but I did go out there today to Edward Street and I sat there from, I don't know, 2:30 to 3:30, and 3 school children walked along the footpaths. Nobody walked on the road, 3 people. But I do agree that the footpath's uneven, and if it was wet, which it wasn't today, it would be, not, they've either got lawn one side or this muddy path the other. So I do agree with that. And Charles Street certainly doesn't, in my opinion, it certainly doesn't need a footpath. DeLand Avenue, well, I did go and have a look at that as well. And yeah, it's a bit hard to put a footpath along there. Yeah, so I'll be voting for this.
Okay, I mean, I had a similar experience. I went down after school time and just observed what was going on, and I reckon I only saw 3 students walk down Edward Street. The footpath on Edward Street on the south side does need upgrading because it is different services, it's not formed, so that's fine. And also then going into Jane, that's the start of putting a footpath on Jane. So in my opinion, I'm quite happy to support this because it does address the motion that was passed. So I think that's fair. Okay, any other discussion? I'll put that, all those in favour? Carried unanimously, thank you. Uh, 7.5 policy review. We've got 2. We've got footpath and cycleways and land division indentures, bonds and bank guarantees. That's pretty exciting. Any questions of the staff? No. Any questions? Yep. Jim, got a question? Okay. Right. No questions for anybody. Okay. So Kelvin, you want to move it? Jim, you want to second it? Okay. Any discussion? No discussion. Okay. All those in favour. That's pretty straightforward. Well, that's good to see. Now, next one is the draft town car parking strategy. I just wanted to point out on, where is it? Page 51 and 59, there's a a bit of an invitation, I suppose, from staff if we wanted to suspend meeting procedures and actually have a bit of a discussion, if people are interested or not. No, no one's interested in doing that. Yep.
Obviously, this is car park for the future
Yes, yes.
and sort of looks good, but is there any indication when and if, and is that all they're going to do?
Yep, maybe staff might like to make a comment. Yep. There we go.
Through the chair, the report presents a whole raft of recommendations that would otherwise seek to work through after consultation and if council endorses the strategy. So there's, again, a whole raft of things. If you go to page 52 of the agenda, you'll see a visualisation of you know, what could otherwise be the next multi-deck car park. And through the investigations thus far, and you know, this is seen as one of the more optimum sites for a multi-deck car park, but there are others. And the reason that we went this far to visualise what a multi-deck car park could look like, it's very conceptual, is to start the conversation with elected members about, is this the right site? Is this the only site? Are there other sites that we should be looking at? Because in the next 5 to 10 years, I certainly think that we do need to be in a position where we are probably going to be building the next multi-level car park. And so this is quite an important junction for us in terms of that thinking. Again, that's why we've created a pretty sort of rough imagery. It was done internally, and we could do something similar on 1 or 2 other sites if members feel that's what we need to start to visualise the next multi-level car park in the town centre in 10 years' time, or such other period that we might think. But this is an important time period for us in that regard.
Jim?
Yeah. While you're on that sort of subject, is that only on council land, or would you consider with developers too?
Where we can facilitate improved car parking outcomes linked to private development, and we can leverage that to the broader public benefit, then that's what we'll be doing as well. Absolutely.
Kelvin, you got it?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions,
Yeah,
but just
go.
on this particular point, which is referenced in point 4 on page 49 of the agenda, where it says that the admin centre is considered to provide the best location. So obviously, I'm just a bit worried that someone's made the decision that that's the best location. I don't necessarily agree with it. I would prefer something more central to the town. I mean, my main focus would be Todd Street, an upgraded Todd Street, because that's highly used. It's the go-to place for most people when they're looking for a park in the centre of the main street. You can service, you can get to all there. We've already got a multi-storey in the northern part of town. So, yeah, I'm just a bit worried about what we're putting out in terms of consultation. So I'd like to see that played around with a bit. As Henry was saying, there are other options, and I guess we've all got our ideas on where those places would be. But so I don't know. Do you want me to raise the other questions I've got now? Or do you want to finish the discussion on this particular?
Just wondered whether there's any chance of including that in the modifying the document, some wording in the document, is that possible? Yep. Go.
Through the chair, the document actually does identify a few other locations, such as Reed Street, King Street, Light Square, a few other spots around north and south of the town as well. So.
It says the list of recommendations from the draft strategy. when you read that, it says, basically says the decision has been made that that's the preferred site. But as long as that's the case, that's fine. I don't want people out there thinking that we've already considered it and that's where it's going to go. You know what I mean? So.
Di, I think you want to comment?
I have a question on what Kelvin's just said. I use Todd Street, not that I use a car very often, but I use Todd Street. But and I find the worst part about Todd Street is that if it's raining, you get out of your car into a puddle of water all the time, which is not really good. But is it big enough to put a multi-storey car park there? I don't think it is.
No.
No. No.
Yeah. Okay. David, I think you're next, then Brian. Yep.
I think what we need is those longer term car parks, like 4 hours or more is the issue. And currently the admin centre is quite popular because you can park there all day. So it's really difficult to get a longer term car park there. The 2 hour car parks, everyone gets stung, and people get stung parking in the staff areas as well there.
Don't do that.
$70-something fine. But yeah, I think there is room there for that multi-deck. But yeah, it's good to give examples. So I'm happy for the report to go out, and I think it's a good example, and it's very important for us as a council to plan for the future, and yeah, agree that and I think people are willing to walk that couple of 100 metres if they know they can park there for 4 or 6 hours or whatever, and do their business in the town as well. That's what I see. It's that shorter term car parking, like at Woolworths, where they get stuck and get fined by council, but it's Woolworths policy for the shorter term. Yeah, happy with the motion.
Brian, you've got a comment?
Thanks, Chairman Paul. Excellent report. I think it's great, and but may I remind every councillor that in 5.5 months there's going to be a brand new council, and I honestly believe we've just got to be a little bit careful of what we put our seal on at this particular point in time. We've heard that Audi might go around there, you know, by Woolies and opposite the post office. Does anybody know anything else? Are they going to have a car park? Are they going to contribute to a car park?
At the front, they will. Yeah. There'd be car park there.
And I mean, it's one of them things that Gawler at the present moment can't handle the traffic they've already got now. And as I like the concept of it. Next to the administration centre, I think that's really great, and so forth. But now we've got the magnificent doctor surgery opening up around there next to the Old Spot Hotel, which is for sale if anybody wants to buy it. Jimmy, you want to buy it? And basically, you cannot tell me that how busy that is, that the car parking that they're providing will cater for that particular thing. So they'll probably park in the car park which is already there, which is mostly with cars in it most of the day. The same with their 4-storey car park. It's people, now the trains are back, you watch, it'll be full every morning before 9 o'clock. So there's a lot more to do, but I congratulate the authors of putting this together. We must have this ready, but we've also got to be careful what we do vote and support on, because in 5.5 months' time we may not be here.
Yep. Diane, you've got a question? Yeah, sure.
I just thought of it then. The car park next to where the new doctor's surgery is going, the one down below on, is it not Finnis Street? Is it? It's on. Is it Finnis? Is that council owned or is that privately owned? Is that Woolworths?
It's Woolies, isn't it? That's Woolies, I think. It's Woolies.
Yeah, through the chair, my understanding is that's a Woolies car park site.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Cody?
So it mentioned that the car parking fund is transitioning to an offset scheme under the new Act. I'm just wondering, is that have any meaningful changes, or is it just a change of definition?
through the chair, it's a change of definition. Similar, just a slight change.
Yeah, Brooke, yep.
Yeah, and on the topic of the car parking fund, I guess, is there further discussion around what triggers the car parking fund? We've just sort of been having some discussions recently around, for example, buildings on Murray Street that are using their pre-existing building, but areas that were, needed to be renovated, similar to the downstairs of the Civic Centre, and at what level that triggers car parking. I was just wondering if that's something that further detail to that is being considered.
Someone like to have a crack at that?
Through the chair. So the recent, well, now 12-month changes to the planning system, the PDI Act, has necessitated us to have a look at what was previously the regime in terms of when staff considered matters under delegation relative to car parking requirements down the main street, what decisions were made under delegation when reports were presented to the CAB. And this is something that we have been working through. The primary focus that we're taking is that where there's an opportunity to activate the main street, we do. Where there's a requirement to make a contribution to the car parking fund, depending on the nature of that contribution, we make a judgment call in terms of, will that be fair and reasonable in the context of the size and nature of the actual proposal, which is a judgment call. However, that whole dynamic, particularly with the introduction of the new Act, is something that we're looking into. We do have a car parking fund. I think it's $400,000. However, it just doesn't sit in an account not doing anything. We've spent a lot of money in the town centre looking at signage, pedestrian movement, cycleways, and a whole raft of things, all of which could be attributed to the purpose of the car parking fund. So there are a number of elements there that we're looking at, but when contributions are made, they are made into the fund, but to a large degree, we're already actioning what the purpose of the fund is there for.
That's the question. Yeah. Kelvin?
Just a couple of small ones.
Yeah.
Point 19 on page 51 talks about installing bike parking in key locations. Are we talking push bikes or motorbikes? Yeah. Which raises the issue of the lack of dedicated motorbike parking in the main street. A lot of towns around the place now are having dedicated motorbike parking areas. And they're designed so they don't use up as many car parking spaces. So perhaps that's something that could be looked at. The other one is a combination of point 20 and point 24, which talks about the bus service, a review of bus service operations and bus stop locations. And a good example would be if there was a bus stop directly outside of Hillier Park, you'd have a lot of the people in Hillier Park using the bus service to get to the main street and therefore leaving their cars at home. At the moment, they've got to walk 100 something metres, which is too far. They won't walk it. So I'm glad to see there's reference to working with DIT and also looking at the bus stop locations. Because I think that would impact the issue of car parking in the main street if we could get more people using public transport from the outlying areas, not necessarily just in the main street. So they're just 2 points on
Okay, excellent. Di, you got a...
Yeah, a couple of things. Firstly, the bus to Hillier Park, when the buses first went in, they wanted to do that, but they couldn't turn around. There was nowhere for them to turn around, so that's why they had to stay where they are. Yeah, but pardon? Yeah, but another thing is I find really ironic is that we supply all these bike tracks, but we don't supply, like your motorbike, we don't supply anywhere for people to put their bikes when they're in town. So, maybe some of these car parks could have 1 or 2 car parks allotted for cycles And also the shopping centres, if they could allot a couple of if we can speak to them and get them to allot a couple of their car racks and put bike racks in there, we might get more people riding their bikes in rather than, you know, everybody in vehicles.
Yep. Okay, any other comments or questions? Brian, this is good. Yep.
Thanks, Paul. Look, Diane raised a point, and so did Kelvin, and I was one that raised it for a long time. And with the amount of money that's been spent on Calbeathan out there as the magnificent sports centre and so forth, the buses, they said, the buses could not turn around. Well, I'm sorry, but, you know, like, all they've got to do is go a short distance further up Anglevale Road. They travel on Bitumen Road all the way, turn right, and then they come back down past Hillier Park and pull up out the front where all the oldies that live at Hillier Park can walk out the gate and hop on. But the bus stop has been put out on the other road and so forth. It can be done. I think we've got to try a bit harder. And I noticed in one of the things that Kelvin picked out was about the point of signage. And, you know, like, it still doesn't exist in this town. I mean, because this was coming up tonight, I drove up there today again on top of Kmart's targets there. Not a car, not a car. I could have done burnouts, smoke outs, everything up there. Wouldn't have hit anybody. No one uses it because you know why? No one knows about it. Please, if you haven't been up there, drive up there and have a look and say, well, hang on, 235 car park and no one's using them? There's something wrong. We've got to get better at signage and letting people know. Maybe some of the money we're spending in the budget, we could have about, hey, do you know this is where you can park? You know, not promoting people.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Does somebody want to move the motion? Diane, yep, and Jim. Diane, you're moving it. Jim, you seconded it. Diane, do you want to speak to it? Spoken to it? Jim? Anybody else want to speak to it? Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. 8.1 Finnis Street multi-level car park toilet area options investigation update. Any questions? Jim, you got a question or? Oh, okay. Any questions, anybody? Comments? David, you want to second it, do you? All right. So, Jim, you've moved it. David, you've seconded it? Okay. Any comments? Cody.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting report. I think, I guess we'll just have to continue looking into the more broad sort of structural reports on the car park. Is there a, is there a, I'm not sure if I saw it on here, but is there a time frame for that?
Through the chairs, we've noted on top of page 56, 59, indicatively next month, July.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Brian?
I was wondering if somebody could answer the question. If you've got a deli and you sell milkshakes and teas and coffee and all that sort of stuff, is it a ruling of having such a business to provide a toilet facility? So what happens when you get cut short?
Okay. I hope your microphone wasn't on, Jim. Okay. Good move. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'll put this, all those in favour, carried unanimously. Right. Items listed for discussion, nothing. Items listed for discussion at future meeting. Oh, yep.
Items of discussion. One of the things that's concerned me is that, as I said, we're 5.5 months down the track and we may all take holidays or whatever it may be. But our finance department are really working and burning the candle at both ends. And it has really concerned me that the priority of this council seems as though it should be right, mate, or whatever it may be, everything will be all right, we'll take leave of absence, all these sort of things and so forth. Now, I'm afraid it's so important, especially now. You know, we're a long way down the red line and that sort of stuff. And I think there's got to be a lot more concentration and effort put in by the elected members that are here. I mean, you know, like the last meeting, I know the finance department put a hell of a lot of work into it, and there was a number of people didn't even apologise to not even attend the meeting. So I'm just wondering whether it's done by way of discussion or whatever may be, but just to take it on board that this council now has to be really serious about the budget to be approved within the next month. And that's a very important issue. So people have got to take time to be able to look at the information. It's a lot of information and sometimes it gets well above my head, but people are willing to answer the questions. But I really think we've got to really be serious in the current climate we're in to make sure that we support our staff in what they've done to be able to hold us as we are at this particular time.
Okay. Yep. Is that more of a statement than something to be listed for further discussion for a future meeting? Was it? Yeah, yeah, thank you. It's more of a statement than an item to be listed for discussion. And there's no items listed for discussion at future meetings. Is there anything we want to discuss at future meetings? Questions without notice? Jim? Yep.
This might be related to Sam. My daughter lives on Potts Road, and I can talk about it because she's in the other council, right? Now, I've noticed also on Alexander Avenue, the Playford Council doing that road, and then all of a sudden it just stops. Why does it stop? Does it go to Gawler Council and we don't have any money to finish it off, or we don't have any money from grants to finish it off? You know what I'm talking about?
If you turn yours off, Jim, and I can. There we go.
I'm aware that some work's occurring in Playford Council on Potts Road, not necessarily Alexander. Notwithstanding that, I'll come back to the elected members, but an update. But there is a council boundary, definitely on Potts Road in that vicinity, and certainly on Alexander. I just don't know the state of works on Alexander, but I'll come back with a response.
Any other questions without notice? Motions without notice? We'll close the meeting then. Thank you. Next meeting, 9th of August, 2022, 20 at 7 o'clock. Thank you, everybody. Well done.